Christopher, you have always been a filmmaker interested in testing new boundaries in storytelling and style. I'm wondering, did outer space always seem to you the ultimate frontier that you wanted to explore?
One of my most important cinematic memories was the first Star Wars, came out in 1977. And I've never really lost that great sense of what the possibilities of movies were based on sitting there watching that as a kid. When that film was so successful, they re-released Kubrick's 2001. And my dad took me to see that on a huge screen in London. And that experience as well, it's just absolutely seared into my brain as kind of, yeah, you can really use a movie to try and take people on a very distant journey. I mean, there were various technical challenges, obviously, and those I enjoy, and you just sort of, you put a great team of people together. I had a great visual effects supervisor, great special effects supervisor, brilliant production designer I'd worked with before, Nathan Crowley, great director of photography who I hadn't worked with before, Hoyte van Hoytema, who I think did some stunning work. So I had a great team to put together to figure out how do we create these environments, how do we put the actors into the reality of that. We made the decision early on not to do any green screens on the film. So we wanted to have these guys come to the set, be able to look out the windows and see what was going to be out those windows, and us be able to kind of grab pieces almost like a documentary.
The sets, Chris already spoke, no green screen, so we built all the sets there in the studio. We were on the glacier in Ireland. We were in Calgary in a house that was built in 500 acres of cornfields. But the size and scope and the things around us never felt overbearing. I had a bit of a concern going into it, wondering if that was going to be overbearing and if I was going to feel like I was receding beneath all that, but didn't at all. The actual shooting of any scenes felt very intimate, very similar to shooting an independent film. You took your time, it was raw, it was natural, there was nothing else going on. That was the pure focus of everybody and the crew. And you never felt the outside, you never felt the weight of, you never had to choreograph a scene you were doing with, okay, and the crane's gonna sweep over, and after you say your second line, step up on your mark, and then go. You never had to, it was all a human connection, so it was very intimate and personal that way. So it didn't feel like a huge movie. Now mind you, we're breaking it down day to day over 5 months. It only felt really huge when I came to see what you just saw on the screen. That's where the scope. But the day-to-day was just, one swinging axe, one at a time, slowly chop the tree down.
It was a wonderful thing to be able to trust, that you'd be able to show up and sit in the chair that you were sitting in, and when you would look out, you would see what your character would be seeing. And I remember there was one day when we were shooting this scene where the Endurance starts to spin in order to achieve gravity. And the image of Earth that we were looking at would sort of rotate in the frame just outside the window, and I got motion sickness looking at it, even though I was sitting there. It was a great gift to, I think we've all done tennis ball acting at this point, and there is a certain skill in that, but when you can just let yourself relax, trust your circumstances, and focus on the work, it's a great gift.
Yeah, let me add on to that. That was just it. We didn't have to play pretend.
We weren't allowed
really
to.
Didn't. Yeah, she has a great story about it, and she was actually told we don't do that on this set.
I accidentally said the word pretend on set, and I was gently, sternly told by Chris that, oh, no, we don't do that here.
We got to behave, basically, and react and act to the circumstances that were there. Again, if if the ship banked right, gravity took you left. You didn't have to really play that. If you saw the event horizon rise outside of the windshield, we saw basically what you're seeing up here. Jessica, you've got stories about the dust. We were not having to play like we had dust in our eyes. We did.
For me, I've never done a large film like this. Most of my films are independently financed and very small. And I'd always had the concern with doing a large film that the acting would be secondary, relationships would be secondary in favor of special effects and explosions. And what was so incredible about working on this is it didn't feel at all different from a movie that I'd be making like $100 a day. 6-day weeks. We were there, and the focus was purely on the relationships. And yes, the world was huge and epic, and there was dust flying at us, and we got to drive through corn and do all these really fun, exciting things. But the heart of the film is about the bonds of love. And it was nice to never lose sight of that in the scope of this world.
Better food, though, than $100 a day film.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done a lot of large-scale films at this point, or for several years I've been doing very large-scale films, a lot of action, big sets, big effects, all this sort of stuff. And the thing I've really learned is, if you do too much of that in a row, day after day, you get very bored with it. It's really fun to be able to do both things. It's really fun to be able to work, just with, Matthew sitting there watching his children grow up too fast, and just shooting his reactions, and it's the only thing we're doing. To be able to do that one day and then the next day just blow something up, I mean, it's really fun. It's just really fun.
What tools did you feel were most important in grounding the science of this film? Because there is a great deal of theoretical and quantum physics.
There's a lot of science in the film, but I always try to make the audience understand, that there's emotional clarity to things, that you can follow the story emotionally. There's no test on the film afterwards. Feel free to be relieved at this point. It really is about just going through the experience with the characters, and if you can just relax and enjoy that ride, you'll get everything out of it you need to. We had an incredible science advisor on the film, Kip Thorne, great astrophysicist who's an executive producer, and he made sure that if people are interested to look at the science of the film, it is based in reality. He was offering a lot of great possibilities for what astrophysics, relativity, these things can offer you narratively, and I found them far more mind-blowing than anything I could come up with, and so I embraced that fully. But the way I look at it, it's like, you watch a James Bond film and Bond has to defuse a nuclear bomb. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to know how he's defusing the nuclear bomb. You just need to know that it's going to blow up if he doesn't do it. To me, that's the sort of guiding principle for the role of science in the film. It's the rule set of the film. It underlies it. And I always feel as an audience member that I can tell, even if I don't understand the rule set, I can sort of tell if it's there or not, or whether it's constantly being cheated. We really wanted the film to feel like we were being honest with the science, even though the audience can't be expected to understand it while they watch the film.
I read the script. I had questions. Like, what is going on in this man's mind? I spent a good afternoon with Kip Thorne to try and get my brain around the plausibility of the worlds we were going into. And then, I must say, daily, one of my favorite parts of this entire process was daily questioning Chris about what are the rules and logistics of this geography. What's what does it mean? What's gravity happening here? How's time different here? I was curious myself, but I needed to know as Cooper the pilot, as the man, with a crew, to best understand the worlds we were going into. And that test that Chris is talking about that no one has to take, I think I could have passed it while we were shooting, but now I may have forgotten a few things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could pass it unless you're still giving D's, which I think that was back in the 70s, early 80s. No, it'd be harder to pass now, but I understood the plausibility, and I'm happy to say yes, I did understand what was coming out of my mouth at the time. But it took a lot of work, and took a lot of asking Kip, and then daily working with Chris and asking him, and going back and forth, trying to understand the logistics.
And how about you?
I had a really great phone call with Kip. It lasted a few hours, and kind of like my character came with a whole series of questions for him. And while he was explaining all my questions about the physics in the film, I knew exactly what he was talking about. I was able to follow it, and I just thought, oh, great, I know what I'm doing. So we finished up the phone call. As it turned out, we both played the trumpet in high school, so we ended on that note, literally. And we hung up the phone, and my husband said, so what did he say? And I went, And I had no idea what we just talked about. It was already gone. And I just thought, okay, well, the good news is I feel it. I feel like I understand it, so that's good. But it led to this really important part of my character, which was feelings matter. It wasn't just about the science. And I loved the idea of playing a skeptic and a spiritualist. You know, you never get to do that. And we live in a time where we think of, at least I encounter the world as, the way it's presented to me is in binary forms. We're very much either or. And Stephen Sondheim has this great line in a song, which is, must it all be either less or more, either plain or grand? Is it always or? Is it never and? You're going to hear Emily Blunt sing that line in a few weeks. And I thought my character really got into that, into the and so I loved getting to explore the physics and then also exploring what that would have meant for her emotionally and spiritually.
None of you got to write equations on a board other than Jessica. And let's talk about your equation writing, Jessica.
I mean, Kip was on set, you know, when we were doing all of those things, and I was bemoaning a bit and saying, my goodness, how do you guys, what exactly does all this mean? And, you know, this is really difficult to memorize because it was an actual equation. It wasn't just something that, you know, Chris wrote and said, okay, this will look good. Kip wrote it. And he told me in actuality the equation I was writing would last 3 blackboards long, at which point I was very comfortable with understanding that I would never be able to know what Kip knows, but I can act like I know what Kip knows. And that was the best part for me.
I definitely felt that I wanted the story to have a certain symbolic quality to it, certain symbols, simple things. The planets, for example, one is water, one is ice, one is desert at the end. You know, I wanted things to have almost like an old silent film, like certain symbolic relevance, things like the dust, things like, you know, the way the characters interact. There's a smaller number of characters in this film than I've made in a very long time. Mm-hmm. And the interactions are actually, even though I think they're very layered, and I think what these guys have done is very real and layered, they're actually quite simple as well, in almost a fable-like way. And I really tried to look back to the great silent films for that. Erich von Stroheim's Greed in particular. I think one of the things I love about 2001 is it's almost like a silent film. Something about, even though people talk a hell of a lot in this film, but something about those simple visual symbols and the way the symbolism of the story is relatively stripped down. Mm-hmm. It felt like that would help you understand the human significance of the more cosmic elements of the film.
Mm-hmm. You could say that in one way that the science fiction is about what Brand's character brought up about love being able to transcend that time. I mean, we all know that our intuitions, our love, or for people of faith, God direct our lives, but it's not measurable. We know it. We know it has import and it directs us, but we don't have a metric system to measure it. So therein lies a very intimate science fiction film, which I think is brought up in this. And it's not about going out there. It's actually about coming right back in here, which is an experience I really enjoy with the film, and the fact that the further out there that we go, the more personal the film actually becomes.